The next set of functions we'd like to take a look at here has to do with rounding numbers. There are going to be three different types of rounding. We have just three separate functions to do this. They all work very, very similar to each other. So I think once you understand how they work, it's very easy to determine when you'd like to use each one of them. The first one that we want to look at here is called round. All of the rounding functions we're going to discuss take two parameters. They take two arguments. Okay. Pretty simple. The first argument is what number would you like the spreadsheet to round? Comma, the second argument has to do with how many digits would you like me to round this number to? Really, how many decimal places would you like me to round? 2 decimal places, 4 decimal places, whole numbers. All right. So the name of this first function is round. There you go. That's what I just said there. So the num is the number you would like to actually round, and the number of digits is how many decimal places would you like that number rounded to. Now, the round function follows all of the typical rules of rounding that you were taught in elementary school. Let's say that the number we wanted to round was 19.6. Well, we want to maybe round it off to the whole number, right? So 19.6, because the decimal, the place value is 6, and it's higher than 5, 19.6 would round to 20. Versus if I gave you 19.2, because the 0.2 is less than 5, 19.2 would round to 19. Right? So this round function follows those standard rules that we were used to and that we've learned. So here's an example of what that might look like. Right? So equals round, A2, comma 3. Take the number in cell A2 and round it off to 3 decimal places. The second example here, equals round, A2, comma 1. Take the number in A2 and round it off to 1 decimal place. All right. It's as simple as that. This is just another example of once you understand how functions work, it's very easy to pick up new ones. All right. So equals round, and it requires two arguments. First, the number you want to round, and secondly, the number of decimal places you would like to round to. So that's the first version of round, equals round. There are two others that I'm just going to throw out there because they work the exact same way, except the rounding changes a little bit. One is called round up, and the other one is called round down. Round up and round down, you can use these if you want to round a number, but you'd like to override the typical rules of rounding. If you use the round up function, that will force the number to round up. So for example, I'll use one of the numbers from the number line here that we just looked at. If I gave you 19.2 and told it round up to the nearest whole number, even though the 0.2 says that this should become 19, this would round up to 20. We'll force it to go up. Same thing here. If I gave you 19.9, this should go to 20 if we were using round, but because we'll use round down, we would force this to be rounded down to 19. All right, so they work the exact same way. What number would you like to round, and how many digits would you like me to round it to, except these are going to override the typical rules of rounding. All right, Mr. P, when would I ever want to do this? Well, I'll tell you, I use this very regularly when I have to calculate your report card grades. Right? On the report card, I have to give a whole number grade. I can't give decimals on your report card. So what I do is I take your report card grade. Let's say your report card average was a 92.1. If I were to round this off, it would want to make this a 92. But what I typically wind up doing is I will use the round up function, and I will take your 92.1, and even though it was supposed to round to 92, I'll round it up to the 93. sorry, I will round that up to the 93. I will ignore the typical rules of rounding and force it to go to the next number. All right, so that's really your round, round up, and round down. They all round numbers. The round function follows the typical rules of rounding we know, and round up and round down will ignore those rules and either force the number to go up or force the number to go down. One of just little tricks that you'll learn here is as we write this, I'm just going to use the round function here for a second. Take the value in A2 and round to 2 decimal places. Right? Take the value in A2 and round to 4 decimal places. If you want to round to a whole number, you can round to 0 decimal places. The 0 means a whole number, because a whole number has 0 decimal places in it. Right? So those are just some ways we can use this. Now, just to throw it out there, how can we actually use the round function? Well, I want to focus here primarily on the number. I want to focus here. Okay? Because the number of digits is pretty straightforward. We could do something like this. You could put an actual number in there, 25.29. Round that number to 0 decimal places to a whole number. The way that I've been showing you has involved a cell reference, which is probably what you're going to wind up doing a lot in your spreadsheets. Go take the number in B15 and round it to 0 decimal places. These are pretty straightforward, I think. But here's where we can actually start to use the round function in a little bit more complicated way. Basically, anything that could be expressed as a number can be put in as that first argument. A number itself, or a cell reference, or here we can actually use a little equation, or a complicated equation if you want. What the spreadsheet will do is actually first go ahead and evaluate this statement. Add C1 plus C2 plus C3 plus C4 divided by 4. Take the average of those numbers. It would get a result. I'm making a number up here. Let's assume the result of that was 75.62. Well, take that 75.62, take the result of that formula, and now round that off to the whole number. Oh, and that would actually round to 76. Okay, so you can actually put in here an expression. You could put an expression in there that would evaluate to a number. So you could write a larger mathematical expression and put around it a round function. Get me the result of this formula and then round it. So we can do it all in one step. And if you really, really want to get crazy, here's another way we can use the round function. Well, if we can put a calculation in here, couldn't we put a function in here? So watch. Equals average C1 colon C4, right? We know the average function. Go get the average of these numbers and give me the result. Again, let's say it's 75.62. Perfect. That function would give you back an actual number. And then take the result of that function and round it off. All right. So we have a lot of options here where you really could put anything you want in the first argument that would evaluate to be a number, whether it's a number itself, a list, a set, or a cell reference, an equation, or a function. Take the result of that math and then round it off to however many decimal places you indicate. So we really could start to do some wacky things with this function. It's a straightforward function. I think it's simple to understand, but Depending on how you want to use it, we can be very straightforward with it, or we can do some more complicated work here, putting together all the things we've been learning. There's your round functions.